Welcome to Positive Recovery MD. If you're listening, chances are you want to create happiness around you and thrive in your life. We're glad you're here and you've come to the right place. This podcast will inspire and motivate you to not merely survive your recovery journey, we'll give you the tools to build or strengthen your foundation to thrive and flourish in your life. Each week, we'll come together as a community to have authentic conversations around addiction, recovery, and what matters. Growth and progress, not perfection. All while developing positive habits for you to utilize in your life. To learn more, please visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to receive the daily positive interventions that we'll review, as well as gain access to exclusive Positive Recovery content available only to Positive Recovery MD listeners. All right, let's get started.
Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another installment of Positive Recovery MD with Dr. Jason Powers and Julie DeNova with a special guest, Erik Howerbush. Let me tell you a little about Erik's story before we get into his bio. He says, I've always been a seeker, even as a young child. I didn't know what to call it, but I could sense the awe and wonder of the immaterial world just by looking at clouds in a blue sky or laying in the grass on a summer's day. As I went through adolescence, all the innocence, awe, and wonder disappeared, and I went into protection mode during a volatile home life. Sports were something that helped me focus my energy and escape. I was athletic and won player of the game in our high school's football state championship, and then went on to play junior Olympic baseball with hopes of turning that into a career. Many athletes have this dream, but for me, it was short-lived because I broke my thumb in a fight before college and my baseball career was put on hold indefinitely. Luckily, I was awarded a scholastic scholarship and turned my attention to that. Drugs and alcohol quickly supplanted the focus and escape that sports had provided. Truth is, there wasn't anything that I felt 100% dedicated to. Whatever helped me move forward in life and created a sense of identity and status, that's what I did at the time. I was first introduced to meditation in college during my freshman year. I remember feeling a strong response to the experience, similar to my childhood connection to nature. Even though meditation had a positive effect on me at the time, it was no match for the other college distractions. I excelled in school and had a lot of fun through it all. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, I had dreams of leaving the countryside and exploring a big city. After graduation, I moved to New York City and worked on Madison Avenue to follow my dream career of being a madman. Well, I did go a little mad, but not in the advertising sense. Over the course of 5 years, I ventured out from an advertising and dabbled in sketch comedy, and at one point started a casting agency. The more I achieved and sought to define who I was by what I had and did, the more I needed and less fulfilled I felt. My partying habits from college had ramped up, and by 27, it was time to escape New York for South Florida and clean up. Over the next 3 years, my life spiraled downwards. The more I tried to manage and cope with my problems, the more problems I created. I was homeless twice in that time, and by 30, I had reached the end. I was sleeping on the beach in South Beach, drifting in and out of blackouts, contemplating suicide when I surrendered. The night of December 14th, 2009, everything changed. I went to a meeting and asked for help. Someone let me sleep on their couch, which I didn't leave for the next year, as we both needed and helped each other. It was a beautiful year of recovery, unlike anything else I had ever experienced. That's when I was reintroduced to meditation and started practicing it as a morning routine. I started taking contrary actions, being honest, open-minded, and willing. My world opened up, and I had a profound shift in my attitude and reaction to life. I was penniless, jobless, but totally content, fulfilled, purposeful, and hopeful because of the recovery work I was doing. It made no sense and impossible to explain to someone, but that was my experience. I had to be broken down, ego deflated, and out of options in order to be willing to look inside, change, and stop running my life in isolation. From that point, my life took on new meaning, and with a solid foundation, quickly changed. After about a year, I got a job back in the industry that had booted me out. I moved to Colorado for work and dove deeper into daily meditation. Colorado opened my eyes to a variety of spiritual paths, including ceremonies with native tribes, a profound experience. I was in Colorado only a year and a half before my company moved me to Santa Monica, California in 2013. That's when my life really opened up. California was like nothing I had ever seen. Santa Monica felt like a dream, somewhere not even real. I remember anticipating bad weather at some point, but day after day, it was sunny and nice, which growing up in Ohio isn't a reality. And the recovery community was on another level. Not just the amount of meetings, but the depth of people looking to go higher spiritually. Because of my recovery life, I knew that meditation was a great foundation, but alone was not enough. Without action, nothing changes. I began working to put everything I had learned into what I later called Meditate Awake. The pandemic hit in early 2020, and I was even more determined to bring the solution to daily living to those who needed it most. People's lives were disrupted, isolated, and there was a need more now than ever for mental and emotional healing. I kept this in mind when creating content for Meditate Awake's Instagram, the daily guided meditations and the insight questions on the app. In January 2021, the app was ready to share and help everyone looking to recover from 2020 and thrive in 2021. I look forward to seeing it grow and helping thousands of people in and out of recovery. So, Erik, what a story. Welcome.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So there's a few things that come up, Julie, right? From that, first of all, the volatile home life and the need to kind of escape. So talk about that. What was that like, and how sports were sort of a way out, a drug in a way.
Sure.
Then, yeah.
When I was about 4, 5, 6, I have an older brother. He's 4 years older than me. I found myself in fantasy all the time. I would put on, back then we had Walkmans. And so I would have a Walkman on and I would be playing this movie in my mind about some alternative life where I was the hero. I was always wanting to be the hero in this daydream. And my home life at the time was, I liked to kid around the way my parents communicated. It sounded like criticism, but it came from love. So there was like a type of energy in the house that was tense. It was always tense. My brother was a very intimidating guy. And I was the type of person where I acted in a way that I thought you would respond well to. So even at an early age, I was masquerading. I got very good at trying to figure out who I needed to be for you. And that carried on to adolescence. And then I found sports. Sports were something where I would get the validation. I could also assume an identity. So, growing up, I never felt like I fit in. I was friends with the athletes. I was friends with all different groups of people, from being in the Latin club, playing chess, doing all these things. I never really felt like I had a real friendship. If I had 2 friends, I was positive that they were better friends with each other than I was with either one of them. So sports became my outlet. And then I found drugs and alcohol at 14. And I had what many people describe as kind of that awakening, where it's like, oh, this must be what regular people feel like. And so I chased that.
Yeah, it's hard for people who don't kind of have that experience to understand what it's like to have that moment, that epiphany where you're convinced you all of a sudden feel the way you imagine everybody else feels, and that you're now on an even playing field. It's completely an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody's going to convince you that it's otherwise. So trying to tell somebody, don't keep doing that, if that's what makes you finally feel normal, that's why it doesn't work, right? I mean,
Right.
nothing could have interrupted that solution.
No, when I heard don't do that, I interpreted that as don't let me catch you doing that.
Well said. Oh my God. Yeah. Like your story is like my story, and I was smiling because my friends were better friends with each other than they were with me. Of course, ask them about it now, they would think that was crazy, but that's us. I don't know many people in the chess club that would have won player of the game in their state football's championship. So of course, chances are you were sort of like an oddball no matter where you went.
Yeah. Well, something that not until I was much old, I'm 41 now. So when I got sober, I was 30. It took me a long time while I was younger, I had this connection to nature. I had this connection to, call it this network energy flow. You can call it higher power, whatever somebody wants to call it. I had this connect, but I also had this, we'll call it the dark passenger. This kind of like, I've been I have this pull to all these different types of energy, and I never knew how to reconcile the totality of the human experience I was having. And so I would present, the good, and I would kind of like either feel shame or hide what I considered bad, because I'm always labeling things and I'm attaching to what I think I need to be. It took me a long time to be able to even accept there was a dark passenger, and that I'm all of it, but, at the time, drugs and alcohol kind of helped me just feel like I had a place in the world.
Oh God, there's so much meaning in drugs and alcohol, right? I mean, Carl Jung, who influenced Bill Wilson, the founder of AA, basically, he coined the term spiritum contra spiritus. And he said, yeah, some alcoholics recover, but only the ones that have a spiritual awakening do. And that's been taken to mean alcohol's a low-level search for God, or whatever the spirituality aspect of it is. Drugs, alcohol, other people, processes, they're so meaningful to us. And how do you replace that, right? I mean, how do you replace that? Julie, what do you think of when you hear the dark passenger? Because that's sort of an amorphous thing. And
yeah, it's interesting. I like the way that you kind of put the picture out there for our listeners to hear, for sure. But I think that's a really common feeling that people in addiction experience, right? Because they know how they want to show up. And especially when the shift starts to happen, when things start unfolding and you start seeing yourself in a different way, but there's still that connection to that kind of dark side, because that's always going to be part of you, right? It's all encompassing, but we tend to want to we don't want the person in the, we don't want them riding shotgun. We want them like in the back or in the trunk, right? We don't even want to have to look over there. But I think it's just, as we grow in our recovery and in our spirituality and our light gets brighter again, I think it starts to extinguish that dark passenger and the shame starts to be lifted.
Yeah. And for me, it really started to shift when I told somebody everything about my life. So I didn't have secrets. And now I live in consultation. And I'm very fortunate. And also at 5 years sober, I graduated to many other 12-step opportunities. So I have a team of guys who we talk about everything. There's no shame. And I think for a lot of people, the fear of other people thinking less than, or that being ridiculed, it keeps people in the shadow, or it keeps people, and it also amplifies whatever it is that's going on in their life as, irreconcilable. They're different. Nobody understands. And truth is, we all have things going on in our life that makes us more common than separate.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you to kind of expound on being homeless, in and out of blackouts, and suicidal, and then going to a meeting and asking for help. Had you ever been to a meeting before? How did you know to do that? And how comfortable was the couch you lived on for a year? It must have been a big couch.
Yeah. I had been to AA at 27. I was in Florida. I did a geographic. It's a long story, but to make it short, I had to get the heat off me. And my brother at the time, who I didn't have a good relationship with, let me crash. He said, you need to get help. You're one of the brightest people I know, but you're one of the dumbest people I know, because you're throwing your life away. That type of non-alcoholic advice where they're just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So I went to AA. It was a men's meeting with 200 guys in West Palm Beach, Florida. I walked in. I'm like, this is where fun goes to die. These people are all a bunch of losers. What are they going to teach me? I'm looking at these steps. I see God. I see a basket with money. I'm like, what's the angle? What's the junkie jive? Let me figure out who I got to placate. And I stayed sober for a month. I got a job, got a haircut, worked out, felt better, thought I was doing better, and had a beer. Nothing happened. And then for me, a beer turns into, bottles of vodka and pills and whatever else. And fast forward, I lose my job. And all of a sudden, I'm homeless for the second time. And for me, I don't like people seeing me when I'm not at my best. So I'm the type of person where you won't hear from me.
Right.
I'm just gone. I'm not going to ask for help. I'm going to figure it out. And the thing about addiction is it gets worse, never better. So for me, the insanity of I got a plan. I'm going to figure it out. I know what I need to do. I'm going from motel room to motel room. I'm I have no money. Then I'm in my car. Then I'm sleep. And I'm at a hostel with a bunch of European people who are like partying, and I'm feeling so depressed. You know, I can't do. And this like I'm getting fake all these things are happening to me. I'm detoxing off Oxycontin, and I'm just sitting there thinking. I walked out to the beach. I looked at the skyline on 4th Street in Miami, and I'm like, I had this thought. I used to be a part of that. That was my thought. The skyline, the people, the laughter. I'd forgotten how to laugh. I'd forgotten what it was to even have a life. And I thought about like walking out into the water and like drowning myself. But if you've ever been to South Beach, the water's really shallow. I mean, I'm thinking I'd have to walk a long way or to like lay down. And I had the moment of clarity, which was I'm having a conversation with myself on the beach. And I'm like, nobody's like a full on conversation with myself out loud. And I just broke, I'm like, I'm crazy, you know? And then I'm like, oh, I'm a real alcoholic. And that's where it was 9 o'clock at night. I said a prayer, you know, the typical, God, I'll do anything you want me to do. And I had that memory of being in an AA about a year and a half, 2 years before, where I was kind of like, I got this. And I'm like, oh, the problem I'm looking with, like there's no escaping my mind. And I'm like, wow, I've tried every move and it got me homeless and broken. And I went into an A meeting with a Batman shirt with holes and vomit and blood on it. And A, it's funny because the worse you look, the more they clap, the more they love you. And I'm like, this is the real deal. Like, I'm the one pushing people away. I'm the one who's restless, irritable, and discontent. I'm the one who's taking everybody's in. It's not them. My reaction to life is my problem. If alcoholism is restlessness, irritability, discontent, then I'm 100% alcoholic because that is my natural resistant state. I don't want to do it. You don't understand. And I finally stopped doing. I said, I'll allow myself to be uncomfortable. I'll go to Starbucks after the 10 p.m. meeting, stand there uncomfortably with my nerves on the outside of my skin. And a guy comes up and he goes, you look new. Is, you know, what tipped him off? Maybe the vomit covered whole shirt. I don't know. And he goes, you could sleep on my couch. And then you should have seen his look when I actually grabbed my trash bag and showed up at his house. He's like, all right, come in. And he had 12 days sober. He had 12 days sober.
Holy moly.
And I went in, and he was from Boston. And you know what? He had a lot of characteristics I could not stand. Overbearing, constantly telling me what I should be doing. And it was a mirror up to my face. And I'm like, this is my test, right? Like this is where I stop separating myself from people. I started doing everything different. I went to 5 meetings a day. You know, we did the crazy, like, let me tell you about who I used to be. He told me about who he used to be. I used to work on Madison Avenue. Oh, I was a photographer. I went to Papua New Guinea and blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. And man, I started to actually recover, which for me just means to feel connected again, you know, to feel like how I described in what you read, which is, you know, this life of trying to be self-satisfied through what the world tends to talk about as measures of success, money, power, prestige, other people's approval, whatever it is. Like, I started to circumvent that and go to the source and look within instead of like looking without. And meditation, prayer, going to meetings. And, you know, this guy, all of a sudden I was okay. You know, it's like feeling okay all of a sudden became amazing. Like, hey, I'm okay.
Right.
Cool.
Good enough. Good enough. By definition is good.
Yeah.
Hey, can I ask you a question? I do not mean to be like an in-your-face interviewer, but you're the real deal. Like I could sense the authenticity, and there's sort of an irony in what you do for a living. You're back in the advertising world, correct?
I am. Yeah.
Isn't that a way of manipulating others? Or like, see, what comes in my head is that you must serve your clients on a deeper level and better than before. But isn't there a certain amount of, how do we separate people from their money? Isn't like the tricks of psychology? How do you sort of, what's the word that I'm looking for? How do you come to terms with that? Or
Like reconcile that?
yeah, how do you reconcile that? Or am I just like way off? Am I
No,
being very cynical?
no. Okay. So when I got sober, I mean, I was escorted out of an ad agency when I was 20. I mean, I was doing things, I probably shouldn't even say on this podcast. I was not a good employee. And I thought I'll never work in advertising again. And I came to, when I got sober, I was like, I probably won't work in advertising again. This Madison Avenue casting agent, whatever story, who I would, offer up to you without you asking, that didn't, all of a sudden I was willing to let go of whoever I thought I was. And so when I got a job, I mean, I worked first year sobriety, I worked landscaping, construction, demolition, painting, Census Bureau worker. I did whatever. I became actually a worker among workers, which for me was like the opposite. I was always trying to be the best at everything. And so when I got this job, I just came with the spirit of service. And I didn't put my job first. I actually put recovery first. I would go to meetings during lunch. I go to meetings in the morning. I was still going to 3 meetings a day and having a full-time job. And so my attitude towards work was, how can I be of service? When it comes to actually the discipline of, or the category of advertising in general, I mean, I think that society, if we'll talk about the majority, that this idea of
Right.
of the programming of people, and like some of the stuff that campaigns I've worked on, like selling, colored sugar water and, telling people they need to travel and do all that stuff. It doesn't, that doesn't feed my soul. Hence why I created Meditate Awake. But on a micro level, my interactions with other people, that's where I can think macro. But for me, I try to live like on a one-on-one, like what we're doing now. My coworker tested positive for COVID. I had COVID. I was able to offer, meditation and some of my experience. And I feel like it's the one-on-one personal relationships multiplied out that make the difference. And I'm hoping that conscious living, treating people well, but people having their own kind of awakening is what the next phase of society comes to.
Absolutely. It reminds me, when I got my master's in positive psychology, I had several of my peers, the co-students, were in advertising or marketing and that type. And there's something called positive marketing, where there's a thing called nudge, and you can sort of, I hate the word manipulate, but arrange the environment so that it influences people making better decisions, healthier, not manipulating and not robbing people of choice or autonomy. But it sounds like that's sort of what you just said without saying it.
We do so much testing, and we, how do people respond to different celebrities, and the company that I work at, they do make a conscious effort to be respectful of, just they try to do it consciously, but it's a corporation. Whenever there's money involved, we still need to make money. It's still a business. And it's like very difficult, I'm sure, for businesses to balance their clients and then their balance sheets. And I will say this, I made a choice to self-fund Meditate Awake, right? So I was part of a startup 4 years ago. I left advertising. I went in to this startup, and it was, we had raised some money, lots of business partners. That was another learning experience for me. If anybody out there has ever, had four business partners, and then it didn't work out, I learned valuable lessons, and I'm like, I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to go back, work a 9 to 5 or 8 to 10, however you want to look at it, because I believe in this. So it's helping me kind of reach my bigger goal.
when did you start Meditate Awake? What actual year did you start? Because you talked about it being in the middle of the pandemic, but I don't know if that's actually when it started or when you actually pushed it out.
I thought so. I'd ended my professional relationship with my business partner in 2019. He wanted to raise money and have investors pay our salaries. I didn't feel comfortable doing that. I'm like, any idea worth investing, it's like I feel like I should be working to pay my salary. And anyway, difference of opinion. And so 2019 is, I have an idea, the conversation where somebody's like, hey, I have this idea for a logo or whatever. Yeah. And I knew that meditation has profoundly freed me from this idea that I'm the voice in my head, and the expansiveness, the expansive awareness and focus and everything else that's kind of been the foundation that has allowed me insight, that has allowed me to take mindful actions that have actually changed my life. And so 2019 is when I started to put the concept together. And then I had to figure out who am I going to hire as a digital artist, a UI designer, a UX designer. And I started using my advertising kind of skills and experience to comprise a team that helped me over 2019 bring it to life.
So I have to say and compliment, the artwork on your Instagram page is just phenomenal. Like, it's beautiful. And in such a short time, you have 12,000 followers already on Instagram. And I will say that the way that you do Meditate Awake, really smart. And it's very familiar to me in some of the work that we do at Positive Recovery. But I love how you do your daily meditation, then you have a daily insight question, and then you go right into your daily action. And so I imagine that the folks that you're working with benefit so much from the work that you're doing. And I love that you had that idea in 2019 and you're already hitting up close to 12,000 followers. It's pretty good.
Well, I give a lot of credit to the social folks that I'm working with. Antonia is probably going to listen to this. And she has been very creative, along with Ashley, with helping me create the content. And one of the things that I wanted that wasn't available with all there's a lot of apps. I started off meditating with the Honest Guys way back when, Jason Stevenson, and guided meditations. And, I talked a little bit about the sweat lodges with Lakota Indians. And I've done, Spirit Rock. I went to Thailand. I went to UCLA, and I've been exposed to a lot of different traditions, modalities, techniques. And there was nothing that was just like, you meditate, there's, first off, how do I live? In recovery, just tell me what to do. What do you do? And then at a certain point, it's like, oh, the answer's inside of me. Oh, that energy flow, the connection, the thing I was covering up with sports, drugs, alcohol, even when we were talking in what you read, I even describe sports as that thing I use to escape. What am I escaping to or from? Where am I going? Where was I before I escaped? There's always this idea of this, I'm going somewhere, but it's like, well, where is it that's deep down inside? The whisper, the whisper, if I can just get still enough. And I developed the 6 areas for awake living that make up conscious living, so it's like choosing that. I do the guided meditations that have a format that I've come up with, and I introduce gratitude and meta meditation, and then the insight question related to the insight, related to the area of intention. And then what are you going to do today to bring meditation to life? So it's giving people a 3-step process that I actually did without even knowing that I was doing it. And it's really the small actions over time are what create change. I heard the analogy, somebody's flying, from Miami to Seattle, just 1 degree, they end up in a totally different location. And it's the same thing with life. It's like the small daily habits that I do. That's what my life is. My life is, what I'm doing here. It's just all the small things in the conversation I'm having with myself.
Yeah, I downloaded your app today. And I just learned about it reading your great narrative. And I chose one of the 6, very practical, by the way. I love it. And I chose sleeping well at night as something I'm not a great I'm not a great sleeper, never have been. And I want to get to that question on how I'm going to apply it after I meditate. So I can't wait for 9:30 to come around. That's when I set the alarm to do it. And I'm a little impatient. I almost set it for right now so I could just get to that question.
Yeah, one of the questions I have, and so there's a new one every day, new insight questions after you meditate. And one of the questions is, sometimes we don't even ask ourselves, what habit do I do that prevents me from getting good sleep? Like for me, if I drink coffee after 2:00, I'm not going to be able to get good sleep. Or if I have my phone next to my bed, I'm scrolling on my phone, right? And it's just the ability to stop and ask ourselves the question is the first step in having kind of that personal accountability. I'm excited for you.
So for our listeners, because something that comes up a lot for me, for people that are in early recovery, because we do some meditation here on our campuses, but always they say, I can't meditate. I can't quiet my mind long enough to meditate. So for our listeners who may be in early recovery, or this is going to become a new practice for them with Meditate Awake, what would you say to someone that's listening?
Yeah.
Like if they give you that?
Yeah, I can't quiet my mind either. Much like I can't stop my heart from beating. I can't stop my mind from thinking, because that's what the mind does. The mind is a beautiful, beautiful organ of thought. And what I ended up having to do with this whole idea of, my brother said it to me, hey, I can't clear my mind. And I'm like, hey, if you ever just clear your mind, you better call me. I'll take you to the hospital. And again, these old ideas, right, of what I think a thing is without actually doing it. What I found for me is that, there's analogies of you drop a rock in a pond and the ripples come out. You just hold it still. The ripples eventually subside. Okay. Or a horse, that as you're training a horse, you have the rope around and you have it taut. And then as it walks around the pole, you loosen the rope. And before you don't need a rope. The horse just walks around. Training the mind is much like training the body. So you don't go off and start with a marathon. You start with walking. You start with jogging. And so usually when people have a lot of trouble and with their mind and controlling their mind, it's because they're trying to control their mind. It's really about observing the mind and practicing sitting in observation. I like to use the anchor, the breath, physical breath, because it's ever present, it's voluntary, it's involuntary. So it's always there in this moment. Most of my life, I was future tripping or I was regretting the past. I was never here in this moment. And so just practicing breathing and feeling the breath, that's the beginning. That's meditating. Meditating is just observation of what is happening in the present moment. I love this topic so much, especially because of the Vipassana, the 10-day silent courses that I wasn't able to do this year because of the pandemic, but I did in previous years, where I'm, silent, not talking to anybody or touching anybody for 10 days, meditating 11 hours a day, and literally sitting there, just observing your breath for 10 hours a day, 3 days straight, and then you move different parts of your body. The connection between the mind and the body, that the body is a reflection of the subconscious mind. Every memory, every interaction, it gets stored. And when somebody kind of sits down for the first time, it can feel like a freight train because we're so used to going to our phones. We're so used to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. But I assure somebody, if they continue to do it, if they continue to practice and observe, that static, frenetic energy is going to settle down and they'll be opened up to a whole different experience and relationship to reality.
It's well said. And Julie, what I say to our clients that are early on that have the same complaint is that in the middle of a crisis, if you expect a meditative practice to intervene and eliminate an issue, then that's not really what meditation is. It's, start where you're at, but it's very hard to do when you're dealing with serious wreckage of the past issues. Just have it as a habit that you can maybe do for 30 seconds, a minute, and we'll build over time. because eventually, as you move forward, the wreckage of the past starts to get cleared away. You have more time. Your mind starts to settle a little bit. But that was perfectly said. That was awesome.
And also for people in recovery specifically, I grew up where everything was a threat, from an emotional threat, mental threat, physical threat. And so I viewed the world, I needed to protect myself and everything. Since everything was a threat, I was always on guard. Okay. And it can take people time to let down their guard and feel like they're in a safe place. And so maybe for them, it's meditating in a certain place alone or with other people, but it's definitely what was just spoken about. It doesn't happen overnight. That's for sure.
So thank you so much. Okay. So let's go into these like quick questions and then we'll do the intervention. What is your favorite sound?
Children laughing.
And what's your least favorite sound?
Oh, I know. Yeah. A smoke alarm that needs the battery changed.
What's your favorite word?
Tremendous.
And least favorite word?
Hate.
And okay, let's say that you can't do what you're doing now. What would you have liked to have tried as a vocation if you could have done it like from childhood till now, say? What would be an ideal vocation for you? Something completely different than what you're doing.
Sports agent.
Jerry Maguire, baby.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about that? I say that and I'm like, that's BS. I wouldn't enjoy that at all.
And you know what? This question is really hard for somebody like yourself who's like found their calling.
Because you know why? Because it's like, what am I basing that on? Like, what's my intention of having a job? Is it what I'm going to make money? Am I going to have status? I know that stuff is, flash in the pan. It's like, I wouldn't enjoy I think it would involve something where I got to interact with many different people around the world. That's what I want to do. I don't know what that job looks like, but hopefully it's what I'm doing.
Evolution. You are.
Yeah.
You are. You're touching a lot of people. Okay. What vocation would you hate doing? Like if I made you do it for the rest of your life, what would be almost like worse than death?
Wow. There's so many of those. Yeah. Anything that I feel like I'm locked into, that I have somebody telling me what to do all day. I mean, you just pick a job that has a desk, no windows.
Clerk in a jail. Okay. So let's assume there is a God, and when you die, what would you like to hear out of God's mouth to you?
Laughter.
Okay. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Jules.
Awesome. So we're going to start with a quote. The quote is by Anonymous. We have lots of Anonymous in our book, but the test of tolerance comes when we are in a majority. The test of courage comes when we are in a minority. The need to conform to a group is a strong and subconscious survival instinct in human beings. Even though courage is the fiber of growth, physical, courage is more prevalent than moral courage. Perhaps it is because it's easier to sacrifice one's body than to overcome the fear of rejection. Agreeing with the majority by nodding or staying silent is easier than standing alone and taking an unpopular view. Going to war with the masses is easier than standing up alone against them and speaking against violence. The cliques formed in grade school and high school are reflections of human herds. Later in life, cliques form in families, workplaces, and societies. So today's positive intervention, or the intervention that we asked you to do, Erik, was only about you. What do you do when you are in the majority, and what you do when you are in the minority? Do you practice tolerance? Do you act with courage? And we asked you to keep those questions in mind and kind of see where you can increase your bravery and compassion throughout the day. We did ask you to kind of journal about what your experience was like and to share it with us. So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind doing that with us now.
I wouldn't mind at all. In fact, I quite enjoyed this exercise. So courage and tolerance, I want to start off with those. Tolerance appears 16 times, 10 in the big book, 6 in the 12 and 12. Courage is 18 times, 8 in the big book, 10 in the 12 and 12. So this idea of tolerance, I'll begin with tolerance. early in my in the story about me being going off to New York because I needed to prove to people I was important. I had this dream and I wanted to do all this stuff, and I just had to figure out who I needed to be. What person did I need to create in order to get what I thought I needed? The life of being self-satisfied and trying to get, and I wrote down two words. Well, it's actually three, but identity and self-worth. And when I gain my identity and self-worth from other people, and I'm in the majority, if they're my source, then of course I'm going to be swayed to not upset them. There's not going to be any amount of bravery. I'm not even going to think of being brave because I'm going to want that majority, those people, the Madison Avenue people, the Instagram people, even the recovery people. I'm going to want them to think well of me. That's the real spiritual illness, by the way, is wanting other people to think well of me. And if I'm not getting the self-worth from me, this energy network, some people call God. And it wasn't until the change happened on December 14th, 2009, because that illusion that somehow whoever those people are, the majority, they weren't with me on the beach. Okay. It was me, my mind, and this power. Okay. And had I not hit bottom, I'm not sure that my operating system, I like to refer, Anthony DeMello, refers to this idea of programming, and him along with Adi Ashanti and several other authors, and Eckhart Tolle. I think of my mind as this operating system, much like a computer, that until it gets Control Alt Delete and wiped, I'm going to rely on inputting data into that operating system, and then I can't fault the operating system that gives me the answer because I haven't upgraded my operating system. So it wasn't until I hit bottom and I had the willingness to look within and not listen to my mind and continue with the programming. That's what it took for me to have bravery, to not care. When I was a year sober, and I'm wearing a lanyard doing Census Bureau in 2010, right? How many people? No, I'm not the police. I'm just a guy with a lanyard.
Not a Mormon, not the police.
Yeah. And I was happy, and because that, to me, having humility, the big book says all men of faith have courage. So there's this idea of having faith and courage. And that, to me, came out of desperation. It came out of the need to change and to go to say the majority is not my higher power. It's through my experience of the ups and downs, the dark passenger, the assets that I have, all of it, where I have compassion for those that do not fall along with the majority. I'm able to identify, with the person who comes into the room, let's say, with one day sober and says, I just blew up my life. My family doesn't want to talk to me. I get along the best with like really, really angry, dangerous guys. Okay. Like because I know they're scared. There's underneath all of it, there's this fear of something. I used to go into prisons and I would take meetings into Men's Central, and this idea, like I'm them, they're me. I just feel like we're all like the same. Everybody's basically the same person with different programming. And so how do we get to that other operating system? Well, for me, it came through surrender. It came through getting my life smashed. That's how I look at, this idea of having tolerance, being in the majority. And then courage. Like I said, faith and courage to me go hand in hand, because I have to believe in something in order to have courage. And yeah, I have written, sometimes I write stuff in shorthand and I'm like, oh, I'll remember the bigger context of what that means. And what I wrote was,
apple, and chair.
Yeah, I just wrote, yeah, you'll know. Avoiding unpleasant and desiring pleasant.
I know what you meant.
I mean, that's basically my life in a nutshell. For me, what takes courage is telling somebody what's really going on. Telling a friend of mine, I'm jammed up about a relationship. Hey, I'm worried about money. Hey, I got this thing going on physically, or I got to go to the doctor, or whatever it is that's going on, and just and not trying to manage their experience. Right? Where it's, hey, I know that you might think this. Let me just manage your experience so I can tell you what I'm going to tell you without getting the response it's going to make me feel bad about myself. So without any of that pretext, to me, a lot of what I do is outside of the normal. Like when I talk to somebody who's not, let's say, in the program or doesn't, it's just kind of like what we'd call normies, where it's like some people can just get by, like go into the office job. Maybe they have some children. Maybe they go, maybe they have a vacation once a year. And I grew up looking at my parents' life thinking, I don't ever want to have this life. I don't know where that came from. I always felt like I was different, and I would hide that differentness. And it's taken me a long time to be able just to feel comfortable telling somebody how I feel, being vulnerable. And recovery has given me an unbelievable window in living in the minority. And even the more I live in the minority, I think that we just don't know. We don't know what's going on in people's lives, or especially nowadays, what people are exposed to as reality. I mean, sometimes I'll watch different channels, or I'll be on different feeds, and I'm like, no wonder people are experiencing they think what's going on in the world is what they're seeing. And I don't think we have a grip on how much we have in common with each other, because I think people are so focused on what's going on that's not it's not happening in their life. They're going to the grocery store, everything's fine. Okay. Or they are going through something that's serious, and they feel like they can't tell anybody.
One of the biggest compliments that I ever received, actually, it was from Dr. Powers. He doesn't know it, so he's probably going to be thinking right now, what is she going to say? But one of them was that he said to me, I love how you don't stay silent, Julie, and that you're okay with putting yourself out there and just going ahead, even if it is going to be an unpopular view. So for me and, for our listeners, I think that ties in nicely to what you were saying when being vulnerable and just sharing with people kind of what you're thinking, how you're feeling, even when you feel like someone, might not agree with you, is a really important aspect, not just of recovery, but just in terms of living your life with integrity and authenticity, right? So, Dr. Powers, thanks for giving me one of my biggest compliments of my life that I carry and cherish with me, for real. I've loved talking with you today, Erik. What I'd love to know is if you would share with our listeners how they can find out more about Meditate Awake, where they should go, and how they can be in touch with you.
Absolutely. Meditate Awake on Instagram is meditate.awake. And you can also go to meditateawake.com. And the app is in the App Store under Meditate Awake. Right now, it's in the iOS App Store. We'll release the Android version later this year. And we look forward to many more updates on how we can support all of the community or Meditation Insight in Action, help people live a conscious life and make life just a little bit better today.
Awesome. Thanks. Dr. Powers, you want to take us out?
Sure. And, we're out of time. So Erik, I just want to say, you probably get tons of recommendations. Read this book, watch this movie, blah, blah, blah. But two things you said make me have to recommend that you see this movie called Finding Joe. Have you heard of it?
I don't know. I don't think.
Okay. Okay. So this is, you're supposed to watch it, and then we'll have a lot to talk about, and I'll have you back on. You must see Finding Joe.
All right.
God speaking, Erik. All right.
I love it.
All right.
Before you take us out, Erik, I have to say it's unusual that we run out of time, right? So we really have totally enjoyed talking with you and learning more about Meditate Awake. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and really, it's been unbelievable. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us again, and we hope you enjoyed this podcast as much as we did.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Positive Recovery MD. Don't forget to visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to get your daily positive intervention sent straight to your inbox. Be sure to subscribe to Positive Recovery MD on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts to receive an automatic download when a new episode drops. And as always, if you or someone you know needs help, visit positiverecovery.com or call 877-4-SOBRIETY, which is 877-476-2743. We are here to help.